Welcome. I am Elizabeth Hamblet. I am a college learning disabilities specialist and a presenter and the author of Seven Steps to College Success, a pathway for students with disabilities. And it is my pleasure to get to spend some time with my friend first and foremost, and also my colleague, Marvin Williams. He and I have known each other a number of years now, and he is my go-to person when I want to talk to folks about the college disability services system. So, Marvin, if you would just, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how long you've been doing this work too.
Good morning. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Elizabeth. It feels like it's not been that long, but it also I know it's been a while. So I'm the director of Disability Resource Services at California State University Stanislaus in lovely, sunny and super hot Turlock, California. And let's see, I've been in the disabilities world for I was actually looking at this the other day. I think we're just about over 25 years now. So it's been a minute, as as uh, as the young people would say, it's been a minute. But it's also been very good, very informative, and it feels like I learn something new every day. So always a pleasure to have you to be able to talk with you about this stuff. It's something that I really find is important.
Yeah, I think that's how you and I came together was, our interest in trying to demystify this environment for people and address some myths and rumors and just, try to make students feel more comfortable about this process. And, you and I had done this previously, and I thought it was time to update it. But the previous video has gotten a lot of views and also a lot of nice comments from students who said that they found it helpful. And so for those of you who are not familiar with my book, the cover of which is here, I talk all about how things shift as your students move from high school to college and what that means as far as the prevailing laws and what they say and what they don't say. And so if your student would like to receive accommodations once they get to college, they are in charge of registering with the Disability Services Office or whatever they are called. Sometimes this is the responsibility just of a dean of students or dean of academic affairs. It varies from college to college, which is one of the more important things that you should know about this process. And so typically what they're going to do is they're going to fill out our form because everything in college has a form. It's always a form. Welcome to
Yeah.
college. And they're often at a lot of colleges, they're going to have what I'm calling an intake meeting. They may vary. And, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, Marvin, too, is because the college process is so fraught for a lot of families, it's very anxiety inducing. And for those of students who can even get one, sometimes in the application process, there is an interview, and there's a lot of pressure on that interview. Students feel like they need to, present themselves a certain way or come with certain information. So let's start with this first question, which is not on the list I sent you, but I'm thinking of it now. Um, do you consider this, and do you want students to consider this an interview? How do you approach the meeting that you have with students? And also, where does this come in your process? So talk to us about your registration process.
I'm glad that you asked, because people often think that this is some sort of high stakes interview, and it's not. So to register for services with us, you've got our website, which actually now we've made a special website called How to Register
Oh,
with
wow.
Disability Resource Services. So people ask, well, how do you register? We go right to the page that tells you exactly how to register. We do it as a three-step process. So the first one is, like you were saying, the application. Got to fill out the application for services. Sometimes people think that just because they had an IEP in high school, or they had a 504 in high school, or they're coming over from a community college, that they're automatically enrolled with us, and they're not. Absolutely, you're not. So you have to fill out that application. Next, we're going to ask for disability verification information. So that might be having, like, just about every campus has a form that, like, your medical practitioner can fill out. Some folks prefer to, or some doctors prefer to provide a letter. I usually tell folks, check with the office to see what would work. Sometimes when doctors give letters, they don't provide all the information that we need. So we try to make sure that we get folks to understand that and get folks to get us what we need the first time, so that way we can just kind of keep it going. And then after that is the interview. So typically the way that we'll do it, because we know that it can take a while for folks to get that documentation, I'll try to make an appointment with a doctor this week. Good luck. You probably have a better job winning the lottery than you would getting in to see the doctor this week. So what we'll do is when we get that application in and we'll see what documentation we have, we'll try to schedule that appointment so that way we can do the intake interview and at least start to do that. We call it an interview just because, well, it's actually more of a conversation than an
Oh, I
interview.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're all that we're doing right now is just talking and finding out from the student who they are, what their academic road has been so far. We're not focusing on grades. We're not finding out, well, what did you get in this class? Well, why did you do poorly on this test? Or why did you do really well on this project? It's not about that. It's trying to find out how it's been for them to be a student. Is it been difficult? Have they had a lot of issues? Have they had no issues? Have they kind of had issues? Are they afraid they might have issues? All of those types of things. We want to get all of that out so we can better understand what it's like for them to be able to manage a disability, because this is all about disability management, really. So, what
Mhm.
it's like for them to be able to manage a disability while being a student. And I understand that there's a lot of stuff in K-12 that it's very different from coming to college, but we can get some nuggets, some information from what that experience was like, and then take a look at how we can best support that student for uh, equitable access in higher education.
Well, and I think one of the challenges that you just pointed to is, right, a lot of times your students are coming in as freshmen, and they have not been to college yet. So they don't know what the environment is going to hold
Right.
for them. So tell me, what kinds of questions should students perhaps expect to be asked? Like what can they expect in an intake meeting? I'm sorry, in an intake conversation.
Yeah, so yeah, that's great. So one of the things, I mean, the thing that throws people off typically is, well, how are you doing? You know, yeah, that they think that it's going to be some sort of inquisition, and it's not. We want to find out just how they're doing. We're also making observations of what we're seeing. How are they doing? If someone comes in and they're visibly nervous, well, we'll see how is that during the conversation. What is, just what's going on, and we might ask about it depending on what's going on, depending on what information we have. But we'll also ask if they know what their disability is.
Yeah, that's an important one. And
We'll lead with, do you have a disability? Because a lot of times we actually ask that on our application,
wow.
but we want to make sure that folks really, if I don't think that I have a disability, then that kind of, then the next question I have is, well, why are we here?
And what is the answer to that question when you ask it?
Yeah, so we have had some folks who say, we have a lot of folks who say yes. We've had some folks who say no.
Uh-huh.
And I was just sitting here because, I'm having difficulty in this class and the professor didn't know where to send me. So, and we'll help them
Oh,
try to figure out with that. Sometimes it's just a matter of, Learning Commons is over here. You can go get tutoring over here.
oh, interesting.
Or,
Okay.
what's your major? You're an
Yeah.
anthropology major. Why are you in this heavy calculus class? So, we need to get you to advising. So we'll try to do what we can to try to make sure that people get to where they need to go instead of just saying, leave, you're not one of us,
Uh,
because it doesn't help anyone. And we're all about
yeah.
trying to help people. Biggest one that we get that's actually, I would say, almost as common as yes is I don't know.
Interesting.
And so we'll have a whole lot of conversations around that I don't know. And that's where we find out that people really haven't had a good conversation, a good discussion with maybe
Right.
whoever diagnosed them. If have a
Mm-hmm.
learning disability and they had maybe a psychological educational assessment, they
Mm-hmm.
haven't had a good discussion over the results of that and what that means. So it's really, how do they understand it beyond what they might hear from social media?
And for those who are saying, what do you mean students come out of high school and they've had an IEP or they've had a 504 and they don't know that they have a disability? If you read Appendix A of my book, you're going to get a dive into the research on this. And it absolutely shows that a number of students in this large longitudinal study who'd had at least one accommodation in high school got to college, didn't register, felt like they didn't have a disability. And so if you want to know more about that, read my book. That is really interesting. Now, let me ask you something too. What kinds of questions, first of all, because like the first step is really the form, right? So, what kinds of questions are on the form? What's your disability? And what else?
So we may ask that. Well, your typical, how old are you?
Uh-huh.
What type of accommodations are you seeking?
Mm-hmm.
Um, how does your disability affect you?
Right. These are all
So,
questions students need to be able to answer.
yeah, so and we're getting ready to update it again because just as we go through and do these, as we get applications in and as we do uh, uh, intakes, we notice, wait, we need to get this information up front. Wait, we should be getting this. This we
Mm-hmm.
used to think we didn't need. Now this is becoming more important for us to be able to
Yeah.
ask. So, but we also ask about like, are they registered with the Department of Rehabilitation
Oh,
or
wow.
Department of Vocational Rehabilitation because they can sometimes help with services and for paying for school.
Mm-hmm.
We'll ask if they're registered with TRIO Student Success Services, which is a federal program that campuses have access to. EOP, what is it? Early Educational Opportunity Programs, Early Opportunity Programs, I think it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see if they're registered with them. Are they a veteran? Because we want to find out
Yeah.
all the different areas that they might be connected to, so that way we can try to provide as holistic service as possible. And we'll ask things like, do you have a computer? Is it a
Mm.
computer? Is it a Chromebook? Do you have access to high-speed internet? A lot of our students, you'd be surprised, don't have access to high-speed internet. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm a person who says, well, I want to take a whole lot of online classes and I don't have access to high-speed internet, that might be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. That definitely seems like a problem. Now, how soon after they enroll at CSU Stanislaus, can students register with your office? Do you like
They
for them to wait?
They can register as soon as they decide that they want to come here. We have students who register with us. They'll fill out the application and all that. Some before they apply, and we tell them, well,
Really?
we have to wait until we get
I like
everything.
the enthusiasm.
I don't even have a student ID number for you or anything
Yeah.
for the system, so
Yeah.
that makes it hard. But as soon as students are registered, or as soon as they've accepted application or they're accepted into the university, we can start the process and we can start meeting with them. What we'll do if they haven't registered for classes, because
Mhm.
we don't do academic advising in my office. So what we'll do is we'll have a couple of meetings. So we might have one, which is just kind of like, um, intake, and we'll take a look at things and we'll maybe consider what accommodations we might be looking at, those types of things. We'll have that type of discussion. But then we might have, especially for our first year students, we'll want to have another meeting after they've registered for classes. So that way we can take a look and start to talk with them about, okay, so now you know where this is going to be going, where you're going to be
Mhm.
going for your classes, what types of classes that you have. Let's take a look at what we've looked at accommodations again. Is there anything that we may be missing, anything that we might need to tailor for a specific class? And that's where we start to get into, okay, now you know who your faculty are.
Mm.
So let's start to take a look at reaching out. How comfortable are you with talking with faculty? We can send out our letters. Okay, we've got a system now where the students can actually engage and they can send out the letters themselves. But we try to recommend that, or we do recommend that the students meet with their faculty before classes start as soon as they can, to where we have to wait till they come back on contract, which might be like a week before classes start. But
Mhm.
we wait for that, and then we try to get them to meet with the faculty so that way that they can make sure that they and their faculty are on the same page when it comes to their accommodations. We offer to be part of that meeting if they want us to.
Oh,
Sometimes
wow.
we
Okay.
are, sometimes we're not. But
Mhm.
we encourage that discussion because that discussion actually models what it's like when you've got a job. and you have a disability, and I'm taking that disability with me to the work world. And now I'm going to have to talk with, I tell people it's two conversations. It's one with your supervisor and one with your supervisor and human resources to talk about what you're going to need for accommodations. So we're
Okay.
trying to get folks used to that. And like I said, we'll support them. We'll go in and have that conversation with them. But we're also trying to get them to learn, especially as they get closer to graduation, how to be able to have those conversations on their own and feel comfortable with them.
Now, as you were talking about specific classes and how things would look,
Yeah.
for folks who are new to this, it's important to know that the laws in place have some exceptions carved into them for the kinds of accommodations colleges have to make. And one of them is that we don't, and I'm not quoting directly, have to do anything that would fundamentally alter our programs.
Right.
And so, for instance, in some colleges, having a substitution for the general ed requirements, like the credits needed for to substitute to pardon me, satisfy the math requirement or the foreign language requirement, students should always ask, and we always have to consider, but it's possible that those kinds of things will not be granted. And then, within certain majors, there are things. So I know sometimes, and when I do research for presentations, sometimes I see that colleges ask students who are registering with disability services what their major is. Now, Marvin, what happens for students coming to you who are just freshmen and, like many others, don't know what they want to major in? Is that a problem?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. If you don't know what you want to major in, then you're coming in as undeclared, and that is fine. Or what often happens too is students will change their majors.
Yeah.
So, when that happens, it's the same type of thing. None of our services are really major dependent. Your accommodations, as you rightly pointed out, they can adjust depending on what you're studying,
Hmm.
and also the field that you're in terms of how where you're doing the work. So let's take for instance, if I'm a student who maybe wants additional time for testing. Okay, I need a little additional time in order to be able to process stuff in the testing environment. Okay, that can be fine. Um, and we may grant that. And I've had folks that say, I've got a nursing student who's in the clinical environment, and they say, well, can I have additional time in order to be able to perform my clinical skills? And with that,
Yeah.
we'd say that's one we will meet with, because that gets into the pedagogy of why things are done in the clinical
Hmm.
environment and why things are taught the way that they are. We engage with our faculty partners and we start to have that conversation. And so we'll talk with faculty, well, is it possible to do this? And the faculty will typically say, well, no, we can't have someone wait while you figure out how to draw their blood. You need to be able to go in and do that. Taking blood pressure, administering medications, or someone's
Yeah.
in an emergency
Hmm.
situation, being able to handle that. So, we'll talk about that because those are where we'd take a look at it becoming the request being a fundamental alteration to the essential elements of the clinical environment, of the clinical portion of the program. The classroom stuff would be one thing, but the clinical would be a different, or for students who are maybe in like a teaching certification program, and they're going to have their classroom work, but they're also going to have their field work that they're going
Hmm.
to. Accommodations might look different based on the field environment and based on the classroom environment. So it's understanding that we could have those changes. Um, I've had students who are math majors, or they want to study math, they want to study a STEM thing, but they want to be able to look at getting a waiver to the general ed math requirement. And we're
Yeah.
saying, well, you can't really do that because you're saying that you're having enough difficulty with math that you're not able to accomplish this, but you want to go into these other things which are very math heavy.
Right.
That's going to be a hard one. But then we'll
Yeah.
also talk with folks about, uh, why is it that why do you want to study this? And a lot of times we have folks who haven't had exposure to what the big breadth and depth
Yeah.
of careers are. I step away from majors and I say careers because that's what it's really about. I mean,
Right.
I can leave college with a major, or once I'm done, my major is done. It's what I studied, but it's not necessarily what I do. So we'll also try to get students to engage with our career and professional development department because they can start to do career explorations and take a look at what they're really passionate about, what is good for them, and then what might be an academic path to get them towards that. So sometimes it seems like it's really linear, but then lots of times it's not.
Hmm. Pardon me. Um, I think that that's a really important point. Everybody goes in thinking it's all gonna, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna like it and I'm gonna keep going. But a lot of students do change their major. And it's not just math requirements too, for students who want to do international relations. That's going to be a foreign language requirement. Art history, things that people probably don't expect. Often, studying opera, I believe they often have to study a foreign language. So that's important to know. Now, I started this conversation by asking you about, kinds of questions you ask, and the fact that this isn't an interview with the kinds of stakes people think of, like when they are in an admission interview. So, just to reassure people, is there anything students might say in an appointment that would mess up their chances to get accommodations?
No, I don't think so. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just really, we just want to talk with you and find out what's going on. I would say the most important thing, we want to hear from the student. We
Uh,
will have a lot of times parents that will want to be part of the process, and we welcome that.
mhm.
But parents, this is also your chance to, start to kind of, let the students speak for themselves and self-advocate. You can work with them on that, but we really need to hear from them. I'll often in meetings ask a student a question, have a parent answer.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
I will repeat the question because I want to hear it from the student. I'll tell the parent, I appreciate that that you want to give, but I need to hear from your student just what is going on.
Hmm.
And because again, once they're done with us here, they're going to need to be able to go out to the workplace and they're going to need to be able to advocate for, they're going to need to be able to talk with human resources about what they need and why they need it. And here's my documentation and here's why I could get this. Here's why I should get this. They need to be able to do all of that. And last I heard, they're not allowing parents to go through and be part of that process.
Although you certainly hear anecdotes in our professional community about parents who have showed up at job interviews. So
Yeah,
yeah, and the important thing, I think for you and me and our colleagues is we want students to feel confident that they have the ability to do these things, that they can
absolutely.
speak for themselves, and we need to provide them with those opportunities to build their skills. I think parents can play a really important role in preparing their students for this conversation. And in the notes for this interview, I'm going to put the link. I have a form online that's kind of like a practice for disability intake that people can try out with their high school student, or they can, and I'll put the link for your intake. They can look at somebody's questionnaire online for a real office and see if their student can fill it out. And it's a great time to do this as they are moving their way through high school. I mean, you could start with freshmen, although let's give those kids a break, maybe. But as they're moving through the grades of high school, ask them to fill this out and see where their gaps in their knowledge are, so that the right people can help them prepare for this. And this isn't also, it's not a performance. They can come with notes, right? They don't have to have it all memorized. They don't remember the year that their disability was first identified, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
people, notes
yeah,
are notes are welcome. Notes are, encouraged.
yeah,
Uh,
it's a strategy, right?
yeah, absolutely, it is. And what it shows me is also how you prepare, how you're moving through things, because that might show me, okay, so what, and I might ask you about the notes. Well, did you prepare these yourself or did someone help you? How did you do
Hmm.
this? Because that might be a strategy that might work for you or help you in the classroom for that. So it's really understanding the main thing we want to understand how these students learn, how they're coming to their education, um, you know, is just what this means for them. Because at the end of the day, and this is the thing that folks don't understand, is I tell people, and I like, okay, so it's provocative, I understand, but I tell folks I'm not here for student success.
Yep,
I'm
yep,
not.
I
I'm
know.
here. I'm here to provide student access because when we
Yeah.
provide equitable access, students are the arbiters of their own success, just like everyone else that's here. So it's a
Hmm.
matter of that. It's a matter of allowing, remove the barriers so that way the students can show what they know, show who they are, as opposed to it's just this barrier that's in the way, and we're looking at that. So that's the importance, I think, of them, just being as transparent as possible.
And I think it's in the wording of 504 that it says that we have to offer an equal opportunity,
Right.
but we are not there to guarantee success. I can't remember exact word. It's in my book. Um, but along those lines, going back to the parents for a moment, sometimes parents are understandably concerned that their student will not register with your office and may wonder, hey, can I fill out Elizabeth's form for her, Marvin? I'm Elizabeth's mom and I'm concerned she needs these, but she won't ask for them.
So we will always have the interview, and we have had some forms some applications that may have been filled out by parents,
Okay.
and we'll have students decline to meet.
Okay. And so
And
without that,
I've had parents call me before and say, "Our student needs your services. He needs this. Can you meet with him? Can you meet with him?" Say, "Yeah." I say, "Does he want to?" "No, he doesn't want to." Well, I'll call him and I'll ask him. So I called and
okay.
I said, "Hey, is this something that you're interested in?" "Nope, I don't need you." "Okay, thank
Okay.
you."
Yeah.
And the parent's like, "Well, is there anything you can do?" I said, "No."
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they're making a choice. You need to have that discussion with your student. You need to have that discussion with your student. And if they don't want it, they got to figure out why. If all of you want to come back and have another conversation with me, you can. But my job is not to convince someone that they need to do something that they don't necessarily want to. My job
Mhm.
is to provide
Yeah.
equitable access.
And I hope people who've gotten this far in this interview are also hearing you say, that you want to help students, that you want students to come to you. We're not here to guarantee their success, but you are invested in trying to connect them with the right resources. And so there's a lot of opportunities, but,
I love it
sometimes,
when I love it when I see students take off and when I see them flourish.
yeah.
I still remember I had a student who came in and she had difficulty with being able to manage her disability and had left school for 15 years
Wow.
and had come
And
back.
return. Good for her.
Daughter was like, I want to do this, but I'm not sure. And I said, we're going through this together. We're doing this together. And, used her accommodations, stepped through with her classes. And I still remember catching up with her. She used to call me a lot and then just stop calling. And then I remember seeing her out over by the library on one of our commencement days in her cap and gown. And she was saying, "Hey, it's graduation. And, I want to thank you." I said, "Don't thank me. Thank the people in your life who were supporting you and who were with you at 3 o'clock in the morning when you were working on those papers or when you were studying for tests." I said, "I was asleep and I was getting a paycheck." So, I just don't want them. I am proud of them. I
Yeah.
absolutely am proud of my students. I want them to feel proud of themselves and to
Yeah.
say, "You know what, I did that. I went through and I got my degree." And it's not that anyone took pity on me. It's not that
Hmm.
anyone said, "Well, we're just going to do this." Not an honorary degree or anything like that. It is a fully earned degree, the same as everyone else. And I want them to
Yeah.
take that with both hands and grab it and go, just like everyone else does.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And some of the research shows that over time, students who start off registered with our office, as they move through classes and they get through sort of the introductory classes that may not be in their areas of strength, science, math, right here. Um, and, often after they get into freshman, sophomore level classes, it's more papers and projects. And so they don't need those accommodations for tests anymore. And so that's certainly not uncommon. Now, Marvin, you started this conversation too by saying that these meetings are a conversation. So, are there questions that you think that students should be asking you when you guys meet with them?
Sure. I think, really, I mean, how often do people come in? That's a thing. How often? Because they might think, well, is it just I see you and then that's it? Can I come
Yeah.
back? Can I see you? Can I email you? Can I call you whenever I'm having a problem? Just because of the volume of students that we have with my office, we don't do walk-ins. But if someone comes in and they're in distress, we'll do what we can for them. But like if someone comes in and they're like, I got to talk to someone about my classes right now, we'll say, well, I can't walk away from one student in order to go and take care of another one. That's why we do appointments. Um, but we will try to get through and get everyone taken care of as best as we can. But I would ask, even before, I'd say if you can, before you apply for a college or before you start, see if you can go in and meet people in the office. And it's important to be able to go in if you can, just because you can see what the logistics are, you can see what the layout is, you can find out where the actual office is, because that first day of school is not the day to try to find it because there's going to be 1,000,000,002 people milling all around. Everyone's going to be lost. It's going to be pandemonium everywhere. So it's the wrong time. But if you can do that ahead of time, that is wonderful. Um,
Hmm.
let's see what other questions I would say. I would ask about if you need like a special if you need help with like a parking permit. I know we require folks to pay for parking, but we do have fee waivers which are available for folks with disabled placards. So um,
Wow.
it's possible for folks to get some of that
Hmm.
cost taken care of. If folks aren't sure, if they're not sure about anything, we say just ask us that. I usually check in with people and I say, so how are you doing? And they say, "Oh, I'm okay." Or they say, "I'm feeling better. I'm feeling good." And if they're just okay, then, I'll try to figure out what's going on. We're watching a lot. We're paying attention to how people are receiving the fire hose of information that we are asking them to drink from.
Fair.
Because
Yeah.
it's a lot. We only got an hour, so it's a lot to go through. But I tell folks every single time, I don't expect you to remember a thing. I don't expect you to remember any of the things that we went through. What I do expect, and I give them a card, I'll give them two. I say, here's my card. When you have a question, ask. When you have a
Hmm.
question, call me. Just remember this card if you remember anything else, and then we'll get you guided through.
And it's not quite, I'm not going to play devil's advocate, so to speak, but you started, part of that conversation was about students who would like to see you more often. There's always going to be a number of students who just want to register with our office and be
Yes.
left alone.
Yep.
And they should know that that level of interaction is also, I'd say much more typical. So
Oh,
if students register, and again, the research talks about the number of students who don't, um, they should know that after that intake meeting, they probably never need to show up physically if they even did the first time, if they didn't do this by Zoom,
right.
at the office. So for those who would like to get their accommodations and just sort of be on their way, that is also an opportunity.
Right, and we also have an automated system so that students can go in, they can log into their portal, and when it comes time to request their letters, they just select the classes that they want letters to go to, hit send, and it's done. If they test with our office, they can go to the portal, schedule their testing through the portal, and it will take care of everything. If they don't want to talk to a person, they don't have to talk to a person, except for if they're testing with us when they come in to say that they're here to take a test. But for
Seems
those folks
polite.
who have their accommodations pretty dialed in, yeah, we won't typically see them.
Hmm.
Good. Because that means that they've got everything going in, but they know, we let them know. We reach out to everybody and we say, hey, just, we're checking in on all of y'all to see how everyone's doing. And I've asked my advisors, just kind of check in with your folks and just say, hey, just reminding you that we are out here. If you have any questions or need anything, let us know.
I like that.
And
Yeah.
then, checking in with our seniors before they graduate. Hey, graduation time is coming up. It looks like you're about to be out of here. How's it going?
Yeah.
And we hear from folks like, yeah, I'm excited. I got a job lined up and I just got to get out of here. Or I'm thinking about grad school. Can you help me out with that? Or I'm scared because I'm graduating. So we hear all of the things, but we try to reach out like that just so that way folks know that we are still here,
Hmm.
but they can engage with us as they would like to.
I love that. And that also, one of the things that you mentioned is how students how professors learn that students are accommodated. So
Right.
what I hear you saying, I think, is you guys, there are some commercial models that colleges subscribe to where students log in and you have it set up so that students themselves get to say yes to send this to these professors, but not to others. And that's
Right.
freedom that you give them. Do you
Right.
also, of the things that they have approved for, because I know this is true in some colleges, can they also select which approved accommodations the professors learn about?
Yes, that's
Okay.
they can. They can choose which accommodations they want
All
and
right.
which approved
After
accommodation.
they've been approved.
Right. And then which professors do they want it to go to? They can
Hmm.
send, I've had some students go through and they're like, I want these three accommodations to go to these two faculty. And then so they hit send and then they come back and they say, okay, I want this one to go to this one. Hit
Hmm.
send. And then this one to go to this one, send, and then I'm done. So it's you can mix it up as much as you want. If there's something new that comes up, then we'll work
Hmm.
on that and say, okay, well, what does this look like? And we've always got an other area on our side, on the practitioner side, where we can type in the specifics of it and say, they're going to need this specific thing for this specific reason. So we're not just like tied to, it might seem like you're ordering from like a Carl's Jr. or Hardee's or something like that, and it's just, it's all what's on the menu. But no, we can get very, very specialized, very, very customized with that too as necessary. And the way that we do our letters is not so much a checkbox with like a list of stuff in a checkbox, but from my time working in hospitals, I borrowed or I changed our form, or I changed our letter to look more like what hospitals might call a letter of medical necessity, which is
Mm.
explaining each request. And then with each request, we say what it is, and then we say, um, how it is to be applied and why the student needs it. Now, we don't go through and like give the disability, but if we'll say the student's going to have difficulty with, they might need additional time for testing, this is going to allow them to be able to best represent the information that they know instead of measuring the impact of their disability. For this additional time, they are also going to need reduced distraction environment. My office can provide that. And so, just yada, 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 that type of
Yeah.
thing, so that it's not just two, 3 words, and then faculty are looking at scratching and say, well, I'm not quite sure what this is, and talking to each other. Right. It's fine if they talk to each other about the things, but what we would like for them to also do is talk to us so that way
Hmm.
we explain it to them. We try to be as open as possible so that way we can answer questions for folks directly as opposed to it being just pure conjecture.
Got it. And I'll just one more question before I wrap this up. So a number of students we know every year start college, they don't register. And then often after the first round of midterms, we get a whole new influx of students. So you want to talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, I would say it's the whole thing of put on the parachute when you're in the plane before you jump out of the plane, because when you jump out of the plane and you don't have the parachute, it's a tough time to try to get back into that plane to get that parachute. Accommodations, for the most part, are not retroactive. So we
Right.
can't go back and undo what has been done.
Correct.
Now, what are periods where there might be some retroactive stuff? If I have a student who maybe has like a sickle cell diagnosis, and because of that, they've missed most of the semester, they might register with my office and they've missed most of the semester. Well, we can't do retroactive accommodation, like we'll give them additional time to take tests or things like that. What we can do is we can facilitate like a medical withdrawal,
Uh-huh.
and then we'll work with them on developing accommodations for the coming semester.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, we'll work with them with that. But as far as can you go back and retest? No, that's not going to happen.
No, but what's also important because I hear people saying this stuff online to each other is there isn't a cutoff. It isn't that if you don't register before classes start or in the first week of classes, and I think maybe people take that from the Pell Grant stuff where, that you've got to be in or drop by the first end of the first week. So students can register anytime they want. It just
I,
means that the accommodations start at that point.
right. And I have had folks come through like the week of finals.
Yeah,
I will have
we
applications
all
for
have. Yep.
Can I hurry up and come through? Can I hurry up and come through? Can I hurry up and come through? It's like, well, you don't even have like a disability verification form in here.
Yeah.
You can meet, but and that's where sometimes it's seniors, you
Yep.
know, but it's getting folks to understand, be proactive, apply
Yeah.
as early as you can, and engage as much as you would like, as
I
much as
love
you
it.
need.
Yeah, exactly. Well, after talking to you, I hope more and more students will be encouraged to register. I hope parents and professionals watching this have found it helpful in thinking about how are you going to prepare students to come to us, to register with us with the information they need. If you want to learn about the accommodations that we commonly approve, and importantly, the ones that we don't. Over here, you can see the barcode for my book. I also have an on-demand webinar that you can watch that's very specific about accommodations. And there are lots of free resources as well on my blog. Some of the interview content with Marvin and some of my colleagues is up for free on my blog. So, as always, Marvin, it's been a pleasure. And I learn something every time I talk to you. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you very much. I always enjoy it.